So let me start by saying thank you to you, Madam Chair, as well as the committee for the opportunity to talk about the Minnesota African American Family Preservation Act. I think it's important for us to put in context that the purpose of this bill is to keep African American families in Minnesota intact when they encounter child protection services. The bill, as you will see through our presentation, intends to address disparities that African American families face in the child welfare system. We believe that it's always important to address any challenges with responsible policy. And so we hope that this committee will move this bill forward. The first thing that is important to note about this bill is that it establishes this act, and it provides for child protection, out-of-home placement, and termination of parental rights processes specific to African American families and disproportionately represented children and families. For example, it prohibits a court from terminating parental rights solely because the parent fails to complete a case plan. This bill also requires case reviews, creates the African American Child Welfare Oversight Council that requires DHS to establish the African American Child Wellbeing Unit, and it establishes grants to provide services and support for African Americans and disproportionately represented children and families involved in Minnesota's child welfare system. Lastly, the bill modifies procedure for the petition for the reestablishment of legal and child relationships. That was a bill that I had passed a couple years ago that required the termination of parental rights to be at least 48 months before a parent whose rights were terminated for an act that was not egregious could petition the court for reestablishment of parental rights after 48 months. We believe it should be shorter. That is what this bill calls for, that to be looked at as well. But this bill also ensures a frequent visitation for African Americans and disproportionately represented children in out-of-home placement, and it requires a cultural competency for people working in child welfare systems and an appropriate unspecified amount of money to administer the act. One of the things that you're going to hear about is that unfortunately African American children are disproportionately taken from their families in our system. And what I like to underscore is that not only is the parents' parental rights are terminated, but the system allows for that child to be separated from his whole entire family. That means grandma, aunts, uncles, siblings. And this bill attempts to, first of all, make the counties and others slow down, take a real hard, active look at what you're doing, and really make sure that you're doing everything possible to keep these families together. Because under 260C, reunification is what is supposed to happen, but it doesn't happen when you think in terms of African American children. The last thing that I'd like to note is that there's been a lot of discussion about the standard around the term active efforts, which is used, just so that you know, in Indian Child Welfare Act as well. It requires local agencies seeking to place an Indian child, if we're looking at ICWA, an Indian child out of home to prove to the court that they made efforts to provide remedial services and rehabilitative programs to prevent the breakup of the Indian family, and that those efforts fail. Reasonable efforts are not federally defined and are generally understood to mean less involvement. This bill and the amendment says, hey, you have to demonstrate and show that you've made active efforts from the beginning, throughout the process, and at the end in order to make sure you've done everything possible in order for African American children to remain unified with their family.